Hello, Liberty students. This morning's lesson, we are starting the book of Judges. This is a fascinating book. In fact, we did a series a couple years ago called Unusual Stories from the Bible, and several of them came from the book of Judges. This is a very tumultuous time in Israel's history. It begins right after Joshua, their great leader, dies, and it's the next decades of, are they going to follow the Lord or not? And Judges 1 and 2 kind of set the scene. In fact, chapter 2 even gives a little summary of what we're about to read. And it's this cycle you're going to see over and over again in the book. Israel wanders away from God and worships other gods. Then God hands them over in judgment to other nations to which they are enslaved, or that overpower them or start to wipe them out, and they cry out to God for help. He sends a deliverer or a judge who comes to save them. They're saved, then they live obediently and peacefully for a time, and then the next generation chooses to rebel again. And so there's several things I want to point out this morning as we get started in the book of Judges. First of all, a big theme is that God continually gets angry with his people because they pursue other gods. And this may make it seem like God is just petty, that, well, I want you to worship me, not those other gods. But the point is that these other gods that they worshipped, Baal and Asherah, Molech and others, these gods of these other nations, the way that they were worshipped was through vile sexually immoral acts, as well as child sacrifice, the burning or offering their babies or their children in death to these gods. And both of these things are things that God forbid, that this is how sexuality works, and this is what makes marriage good, and this is what makes this right, because he created it. And he's the one who creates life. He's the one who gives life. Children are a gift, not to be offered in death as a sacrifice to these gods. And so all of these horrible things are done in the name of worshiping these gods. And so it's not just God saying, hey, you ought to worship me instead of them. The acts they're performing that are destroying each other and offending God, not just offending in a personal way, but he's holy and he's perfect and he's set up the way to live, and they're choosing something else that is destroying what he has created. And there's another interesting phrase in the Bible. The Bible does say that God is a jealous God. And a lot of people who are skeptics have a hard time with this, because how can the Bible characterize God as jealous when God says jealousy is bad? And it's an interesting word, because a lot of times when we're trying to describe the nature of God, when the Bible authors are trying to describe the emotions of God, they have to use words that we're familiar with so we can begin to wrap our minds around it. But it's not. But what's interesting is, you and me don't have the right to be jealous, because we don't deserve worship or affection or things from others, because all humans are on even playing field. We're all creations, we are all sinful, we are all fallen, right? So for us to have an attitude of I deserve more than others is sinful. But God is perfect and holy. There is no one like God. So for God to have a holy jealousy that says you shouldn't worship anyone else, because none of these false gods are worthy of what I am worthy of. But it's not purely self-motivated by God. It's for his own glory, but it is also for our good. Because when these people rebel against God, not only is it an affront to God's holiness, it is destruction for them and those around them. For their children, they're sacrificing. For the sexual morality that they're spreading, they're destroying themselves. And so this is a theme that runs throughout the book. So it's a reminder, man, God's being harsh. They just worshipped other gods. What's the big deal? It's because that's what's happening. All right? There's something also great in this lesson as we talk about kind of drilling this application down. Because what we're looking at is, it says in Judges 3 that God left some of these other nations around them to test them, to see if they would blend in or if they would follow the Lord. And it has a great thing here. It says, I'm just going to read it. Who do you look like? Not in a physical sense, but in your character, in your identity. Is your identity wrapped up in who God says you are, or is it wrapped up in who the world says you're supposed to be? The world tells us we're supposed to fit into a mold. We're supposed to be popular yet unique. We're supposed to look a certain way. We're supposed to have the latest trends or think our parents are crazy. We're supposed to go through a wild phase and experiment with alcohol. We're supposed to test sexual boundaries in our relationships. But God doesn't say any of this. And that's kind of the trick with teenage years is our culture has kind of created this whole idea of, hey, during these years, just explore and do whatever you want, because that's cool. But God doesn't say that. He calls us to look like his son, Jesus. What's at stake if you don't? You miss out on walking in your real identity. You settle for a cheap version of yourself and look like everyone else, but God calls you to more. And what's interesting about the story of Judges 2 is that it seems like it goes in generations. One generation will mess up, they'll repent, then they will serve the Lord, and there's these years of peace and obedience, and then they die off, and it's the next generation. So the question, students, for you is, will you be a generation that follows the Lord or who walks away? But a good reminder for this morning as well, and one takeaway from the lesson is this, that God's perseverance in delivering us is greater than our inclination to sin. Israel keeps rebelling, but God's mercy and grace and deliverance perseveres over their rebellion. And he's always working to bring us back to himself. So get into some good discussion this morning, and can't wait to hear what comes out of our study of the book of Judges.